Earlier this month, Lawrence and I hosted a webinar for the Chartered Management Institute. It was called Reflect, Reshape, Respond. And we were really giving people a chance to take a time out and reflect on their experience of lockdown. And this is part of our Conscious Living series, where we as coaches have put together a series of webinars to help people bring conscious awareness to how they live in every aspect, whether it's how you have your conversations, how you manage your career. And what we want to do is bring tools that we use ourselves as coaches with our clients to a much wider audience. So this webinar was really about helping people use the tool of reflection to reflect on their experience and what they learned about themselves, and then reshape their life with what they'd learned. So make conscious decisions to change your life for the better based on your experience of lockdown. And we had a lot of fun running this webinar, and we had loads of great questions. We didn't have time to answer all of them, so we promised that we'd do a follow-up, which is what this is. This is the follow-up to that session. We're going to answer some of your questions and just give you some tips of how to take this forward. Now, something that did come up quite a lot was careers, and I think that this period has helped people reflect on their careers and how they spend their time and where they work. So that was a theme of many questions. And off the back of that, we'll be re-hosting on the 21st of September our Conscious Careers Workshop, which is all about how to take time out and reflect to make really good conscious career decisions about how you use your time and your skills and your brain power. And in that workshop, we're really helping you tap into your strengths and your flow states. What conditions do you work best under? What really plays to your strengths and your values so that you can choose work and make conscious career decisions that really work for you and mean you have a career that you really love. So let's get back to this topic, which is all about how we reflect and reshape based on our lockdown experience.
Great. And one of the things we did in the workshop, we asked people about what they wanted to keep and what they wanted to change. So just summarizing some of those things, that what would you like to keep as a result of lockdown and having to live your life very differently? Some people really liked the fact that there was no commute or a much shorter commute, exercising outside, getting into that daily routine, eating healthier, less drinking, and lack of FOMO and overscheduling, all that sort of opportunity to go out was taken away from you from the outside. Rediscovering and enjoying your local neighborhood, that's been a big trend. People really noticing that what is on their doorstep, and socializing with people who live far away. I know I did a lot of that, reconnecting with people who live in different continents, old friends. So using it as an opportunity, because we were using, obviously, working online, connecting online so much more. Then we also asked people, what would you like to change as a result of lockdown? And people found, yes, they were too sedentary, not seeing people in person. Where some people, especially the extroverts in us, really need that physical human contact. So people really missing that in-person connection, feeling out of control, that sense that our lives are being controlled from the outside. And I know for some people that really causes quite a lot of anxiety. Realizing they wanted to change where they lived. They didn't like where they lived. Now, I appreciate for some of us living at the top of a tower block, yeah, you might want to change that if you have that power. But even in the neighborhood where you live, people were like, I fancy a change. I don't want to live in the city anymore. And I know I took that opportunity. I'm basically literally just in the process of moving from London to Manchester, a place that was home before. So I've used this whole experience as an opportunity to create big change myself. And careers, in many ways, people may have realized, whether they don't enjoy their specific job, their career, the team, it's been a disruptor to make people think about, actually, I want to create some change here. I don't necessarily know what that change is, but I want to create some change. And hey, relationships. I know it's been difficult for some people living on top of each other, particularly who haven't got the space, or the fact you've been spending all that time together. It's actually, this isn't working. Again, it's been so disruptive, the way we live. And it's maybe made us face up to things that were long-standing underneath it all. So a lot of people brought to the room, but there was a lot of people wanted to ask us. So as Emilie mentioned, there were some more questions, and this is the opportunity now. So we're going to take it in turns, have a bit of a conversation. Emilie, I'm going to hand over to you to get the ball rolling.
So the first question that we were asked was, how do I avoid reverting back to my old habits about overfilling my social calendar? And I think this really comes into the point you were saying about FOMO. People have really enjoyed that they don't have this fear of missing out of other things going on, because our social lives kind of changed or evaporated. They weren't, you had to go to after work drinks, or there weren't lots of invitations to go and see a show or go to a gallery, and you might miss it because it was only here for 2 months. And a lot of people on our call seem to really feel better to not have that pressure. And they're worried about what happens when the invitations start coming back in, when we're out of lockdown and we can start socializing more. And I think there's a couple of really key points here. But it is about taking control of your own time, which again, we talk about that in Conscious Careers, about your time is a resource and you should choose how to use it so it works for you. So there's 2 things here for me. And Lawrence, you might have some other ideas afterwards, but for me, there's 2 key tools that you need to develop to avoid overfilling your schedule when we're allowed to do that again. The first one is just very practical. Set yourself some rules about how your time is used. And I have to do this because Lawrence knows I say yes to everything, and then my calendar gets out of control. So I have some rules. There are certain nights of the week that, unless it was someone getting married, I won't say yes to a social engagement, because that time is my time or time with my partner. So I've protected time with my partner as well. So just set yourself some rules, like on Sunday, no meetings, no calls time with the family. Maybe Monday night is your night and you just don't book anything in unless it really couldn't happen any other time. And just set yourself those rules. Now, something else I found was that I moved to having a paper diary several years ago. Having moved to online like everyone else, I moved to paper because I could see on 2 pages my week. And then before I said yes to something, I could see that the day before was super busy. So probably I needed some time off. Whereas when you're doing your diary in your phone, you can't necessarily easily see like the day before is really busy and the days after really busy. You just see that you're free and you just say yes. So I think there's some practical things you can do about setting boundaries with your time. The other key skill is learning to say no. And I think that's where a lot of people who suffer from this FOMO also struggle to say no to invitations, because they feel like it's rude and they don't want to offend people. And I think it's just with practice, you just have to say, oh, no, thank you. Always be well-mannered about it. No, thank you. I can't do that event. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to justify it and say, oh, I'm busy with the kids, or I've got a clash. You can just say, oh, no, thank you, but thanks for inviting me. And maybe in future, I'll come to the next event. But I get my clients a lot to practice saying no, because they struggle with it. And just start practicing saying no to things as they come in, and just say yes to the things that you're really excited to do, instead of automatically saying yes to everything you get asked to. Lawrence, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
Well, it just very much adds to what you were just saying there, because FOMO, I remember I used to get it when I was younger, but part of that sometimes, what's that need I'm trying to fill there? Now, without getting too analytical, sometimes we want to please other people. We don't want to let other people down. So I think the invitation there is you're allowed to be selfish.
Oh, totally.
To look after your own health and well-being is a way of being of service to those closest to you, the wider world. You can't do everything. So sometimes we're making it about ourselves by thinking other people, what will they think of me? Well, maybe you can just go inside and be okay with that. You don't have to please everyone. So that's the only thing I'd add there.
Absolutely. Just answer for yourself. And that's a really good point about, you would also, if it was your friend asking you, you wouldn't want your friend to say yes if you invited them to something when actually they really just needed a night off. You'd rather they didn't. So you've got to translate that back to yourself and think, oh no, my friend would rather I said no if it's not the right thing for me.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to question 2, Lawrence. So the next question was, how does someone find balance between working from home and working from the office? So this is now that some people are transitioning, that they can start going back into the office. How do you find a balance between the two? And also, how does an employer find that balance for their team?
Yeah. And, really interesting on LinkedIn, I saw the other day, someone had done a survey. It was one of those LinkedIn posts that became viral. So I think he had 215,000 responses.
Wow.
But the key stat that came out, I think, was 70% of people would be quite happy to work from home for 3 days a week, 60% of the week. And really, what was it before? Let's just say it was maybe about 1 day a week, but it depended on the kind of role you're in, the kind of industry you're in. So that is a big trend in terms of what people would like. Goes back to that point about less commuting, etc. But it is so individual, isn't it? So we have to ask ourselves, how much choice and freedom do I have here? there's a dialogue to be had with the manager, or if you're the manager itself, having those conversations. So I think it's just realizing, well, what works for me? What works best for me? Whether it is 3 days at home, 4 days, or for the extroverts who've hated it, or maybe they have circumstances where it just doesn't work working from home. So we can be honest with ourselves. What brings out the best in me? Recognizing we have other responsibilities and needs as well. And a lot of that, I think, is down to your personality, but also the team and organizational dynamics. You know, we've both got an opinion on this, but what does your team need? If you're let's just say you're a business owner, a startup, an entrepreneur, what does your team need? Well, I do know that as a result of being online, we had to communicate in a completely different way. Online communication is so important, but this goes back to open and honest dialogue. So important for a team to work effectively. Now, some of you watching might say, that's fine, but I work in a massive bank. Well, it starts from the bottom up, doesn't it? So I think it's that extent to which we can express what we need to those around us, or if we're the one with some kind of power and influence, we can ask what our team needs. It's just about finding balance and being honest with ourselves, really. And all I'd add to that, think about it, if the trend is to move towards more working at home, and you are insisting as the boss, or the big corporate is saying you must come back to the office, well, that becomes part of the staff retention and recruitment. So this is going to basically influence how all of, where there is that scope to work from home. It's like, well, it becomes a perk of the job. You can work from home 3 or 4 days a week. Anything to add on that, Emilie?
No, I think that's really key, what you're saying about the communication. Initiate the conversation, whether you're the boss or the team member. Initiate the conversation about what is working and what isn't, and talk about both sides. What are the pros and cons of working from home? What are the pros and cons from working in the office? Because if one of the pros of working in the office is that you're all together at the same time, then staggering the days that you come back isn't going to work. So you want to make sure that when you're doing one, you're getting the benefits of that one. And then when you're doing the other, you've set it up so you can get the benefits of that. So actually there could be this wonderful mix where you kind of get the best of both worlds, but you have to initiate the conversation. You cannot assume that your team want it to be the same way that you do, like a lot of bosses do. You must ask people what their experience is. You might be really surprised by the answer.
Yeah, great. So question 3, I'll ask you, Emilie. So how do we adapt and make plans for the next few months, given the rules and circumstances around COVID keep changing? And that is very much still the case.
It really is. And my clients have definitely been struggling with it, because it's the amount of time that this uncertainty has gone on. We can deal with a certain amount of uncertainty. And I shared a really great article I saw this week on LinkedIn about that we can cope with adversity for a certain period. We're very capable of adapting to change and emergency situations. But when it goes on as long as this one, we kind of run out of steam, basically. We run out of resilience, because we do like routine as people. And as humans, we respond very well to routine and building habits, and we coach our clients on doing that. So how do you respond when you can't get into a routine, or you think you get into a routine and then the circumstances change? And what I said on that post was, just stop trying to plan the next 6 months, because you do not know what decisions the government may or may not make, what they may put in place that they might retract later. We don't know. So I said, just try and plan for a shorter period. So a sensible period is to plan for the next 4 weeks. Assume that the restrictions we're under right now will be in place for the next 4 weeks, and plan accordingly when it's planning, whether it's time away, whether it's how you're going to work, whether it's your social life. Just plan it on that basis to give yourself a certain amount of certainty. Because people in their lives, they like a certain amount of certainty where everything's structured and regular. And then people like a certain amount of variety or uncertainty, because if our life was the same every day, we get bored of it. And everybody is somewhere on that spectrum. So some people really like a lot of certainty, and they found lockdown very hard. And some people like quite a lot of variety, but even they have found it hard, because they can normally control the variety they have in their life, and now they can't. So I'd also say, work out what you can control. And if you're someone who needs some certainty, put the structure in, have a routine every morning, try and create some certainty and control in your life. And if you're someone who likes variety, but some of the things that you like to do as part of the variety of your life, you can't do anymore, then go exploring and find new ways and new creative ways to add variety into your life. But at the same time, now has also been a wonderful time for those of us, and I'll include myself in this, who like control and like structure. it has been a great time for us to learn to let go a bit. And we can't be in control of everything. And it helps us just let go and just adapt and say, okay, you know, I often say kind of treat your year like 52 weeks. So I'm just going to plan. I've just been planning what my week is, and I'll just experience that week. And I'm trying not to think too much about the next few weeks. And then I just do life a week at a time. And I found that has really helped me get through this period.
Yeah. And there was a related question to that, wasn't there, Emilie? It's like, what top habits do you recommend to help people cope with the ongoing stress and uncertainty around lockdown and keeping themselves mentally well? I think that's an ancillary question. You've just answered a lot of that actually in what you've just said. So I'd just like to reiterate there, you know, how we deal with the stress and uncertainty and stay well. Well, a lot of that we should have been doing before or thinking about. So depending on, you know, what your practices are, but having some form of daily practice, the evidence is stronger and stronger that if you start your day, not by just jumping on the phone or straight onto the computer, putting a time aside, 30 minutes, 45 minutes for some kind of practice, whatever works for you. I've got the yoga, bit of meditation, bit of light reading for 30 to 40 minutes. I try and do that 5 times a week. That's just my thing. And I do know that when we just dive straight into the day, that just gets us going. So we need to prepare ourselves. So this is also about creating boundaries. So the point here is that that division between at home and work has been very much challenged and broken down. So what can you do to create those boundaries, whether it is work and life, but in other aspects of your life too, what Nert IL calls time boxing. So an hour where you are spending time with your children or your partner or doing your reading, doing your exercise, just having some kind of structure and trying your best to stick to it, because there's always going to be emergencies and things. But this is about your commitment and your commitment to yourself. Another dimension, if you think about maintaining our well-being, particularly if we've been more socially isolated, it's putting in the effort to basically keep connecting with people. Yes, we have our friends. Yes, we can start going out a bit more. And the world is adapting. I've been going out where you're outside. I'm up in Manchester now where there's all these rules. So the world is adapting. But understanding yourself, what feeds you and what nourishes you. So it's just that reminder to keep connecting with other people, those close to you, those beyond you, and even making new friends, getting involved in new networks, new hobbies. And this is the point, I think, when you see it with a lot of people with mental health issues and a lot of the campaigning is, don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to show vulnerability and be okay saying, hey, I need a bit of support right now. All I know is when I see on Facebook someone's really struggling, and it kind of is a little bit last resorty, the love that they get showered with is incredible. Now, some of you might not be that comfortable being that open, but I think let's remind ourselves that people love helping each other and people love to be asked. So just a little reminder there. Anything to add to that, Emilie?
Well, you know, I'm always super action oriented. So I'm always, with my clients, I always say, make a happy list in your phone, have a note, and write down things that you can do that take only 5 or 10 minutes that make you feel better. And then when you're not feeling good, don't kind of instinctively go for food or alcohol or a TV comforter. Go to the happy list that you wrote when you were kind of much calmer, of the things that genuinely make you feel better. And it can just be, I mean, I know I feel better if I just go outside for 5 minutes, just the fresh air and the sunshine. Definitely if I watch some comedy for 5 minutes, they've actually shown that changes your hormones and lowers your stress hormones. So there's lots of things you can do that don't take very long. You don't need to book a whole spa day. And, you know, sometimes you do feel like just ignoring your emails for a week, but actually there's quite a lot you can do that's just a 5-10 minute action that makes you feel much better. So write that list now while you're feeling quite calm. And next time you're feeling stressed, depressed, tearful, first of all, just sit with the feeling for a minute. You know, you don't have to cover it up. Reflect, you know, we're big on reflection. Think, why am I feeling like this? And then once you've done that, go to that list and go, right, I'm going to spend 5 minutes doing one of these things that makes me really happy, whether it's reading a trashy magazine, whether it's baking, I find that incredibly therapeutic, or cooking, or just watching your favorite comedy clips, whatever it is, just get on and do it.
Absolutely, yeah. And that leads us to question 5. How do I cope with the anxiety of returning to work when I've realized I'm much happier not being around my colleagues? Now, that's a really specific viewpoint. Someone, whoever asked that question, has revealed something there. What do you say to that, Emilie?
Well, first of all, that is not the only person who's brought that question up. As you know, I've been doing loads of webinars in this period, and a few people have said one of the things they've realized is that the people they work with cause them a lot of stress, or they find them quite negative to hang around. There's so much to unpack here, but let's try and do the short version. First of all, hopefully those other people also have reflected on the same thing. And maybe when people come back to work, you might notice that some of your colleagues change their behavior somewhat because they've also had time to reflect. So let's be optimistic and think maybe they'll come back with a more positive mindset. But there's also a few things here. You've got to take time to reflect. Don't jump straight to the conclusion that you just don't like your work colleagues. Stop and think, really, what have you not missed? Is it that your work environment was too loud and busy? Is it that it's your job itself that you find stressful? Is it that the people around you say quite negative things? So just take some time out first to really reflect and think of all the things that you're worried about returning to the office, and reflect on all of those. Now, there's also a really key skill in life, which is just making sure that you have emotional boundaries. So you can be around people who might be expressing different views to you or might be feeling negative, but you're in a good place, you're in a good solid place emotionally, that you can just see, oh, well, that's their thing. You can even maybe have a little laugh about it yourself and just think, oh, there they are being a negative Nelly, kind of how typical. I used to do that with some of my colleagues in my head. I'd think, oh, they're just being their typical selves. But I could see it for what it was, which is them worrying about their business. It's their business, not yours. So I think actually building that resistance, and one of the reasons people might be struggling with it now as they return to work is they've not had to have that protection for a while. So they've kind of dropped their guard. So it now feels a little bit more stressful. But on a deeper level, and this is where someone asking this question should probably attend our workshop on conscious careers. On a deeper level, if you regularly find that you feel like a bit of a fish out of water with your colleagues, or they just have a very different outlook and you just don't feel good being around them, it may be that you are in the wrong job, in the wrong place with the wrong people. So fundamentally, that may be true. Now, I would encourage people not to kind of have knee-jerk reactions to lockdown and just end their relationship, change their career and move country. Although I know, Lawrence, you've moved to Manchester, but I would exercise some caution on major decisions. But at the same time, if you really think about it, if you're not in the right place, it's time to go exploring and start finding somewhere that you can work, where you do work with the right people. Because when you find a job that really connects with your purpose and your strengths, and you find people that really appreciate you for you and you appreciate them for them, then you can really flourish and become much more successful. So it is definitely worth reflecting on and unpacking on those different levels and finding out whether it's just that you need to build a little bit of resilience or whether you fundamentally need to find somewhere new to work.
Cool.
Do you have anything to add to that, Lawrence?
No, I think you've covered it perfectly there.
Thank you. So last question is that we talked about in our webinar, we talked about the big experiment. And for those of you who haven't watched it, we'll put the link below to the webinar so you can watch it again. But we said lockdown's been the biggest experiment of our generation because we've been forced to change our lives almost overnight in unprecedented ways. And it's great because we've been able to reflect on it now and say, oh, well, what out of that worked and what didn't? So we've had a chance to experiment and reflect, and now things will go back to normal in some way. We can choose whether we go back to how things are or whether we want to keep some of the changes we've made. And what we put in the end of our webinar was actually, don't spend your life waiting for someone to force a big experiment on you. You can make these experiments yourself. You can experiment with living and working somewhere different and doing your job remotely. You can experiment by changing your work altogether. You can experiment with the kind of exercise you do. So Lawrence, we kind of posed at the end of that session, we posed to people that every other month they should set an experiment and they shouldn't prejudge the outcome. They shouldn't prejudge whether they're going to, at the end of it, decide to keep up that habit or drop it. But the idea was just to try it out, commit to it. Don't just do something once, commit to it and see over a period of month how you feel about it. So I know some people who attended are going to need some guidance on what those experiments might be. So do you have any suggestions for some of the big experiments people could do?
Yeah, and you know, within the context of the materials in the webinar, but also the handout, there is the bigger context of, you know, the wheel of life. Anyone who's had coaching before, and the categories we use are relationships, career and work, health and well-being, hobbies and lifestyle, stuff we enjoy doing, but also purpose and meaning. Now, it can be this quite a small aspect. So my example, yeah, so basically I've moved to Manchester. I've really enjoyed the fact the gyms are open again. I did find a way to kind of exercise at home, but I'm like, you know what? I was loving weightlifting. I'm going to get a weightlifting coach. And I found one in my local gym. And my coach was saying to me this morning, it's like, so what's the goal? What's the target? And it's like, well, let's try and squat 100 kg. That's a lot for me.
That is a lot.
A lot. But the point is, it's a stretch goal. And I'll spend the next 3-4 months working a couple of times a week with this new coach. And it's, yes, I'll be doing lots of other things for my health and fitness, but it's a really specific little experiment. I know I quite enjoy weightlifting, but let's really go for it. And that's the point here. Is that what was it about lockdown that makes you reflect now and take stock and like, I could play around with something different here. It could be to do with your career or learning something new. It's like, I know some people say, well, actually, I want to do a bit of coding, or I'm going to learn some new technical skills. And you can go on a 2-3 month course. You can basically learn at your own pace now. There's such amazing digital resources. Something that it might help you with your career. It might supplement your skills, but you're not going all in on the big change. Relationships, you know, the things you do with your partner or the people with your friends, the way you kind of connect and do things. Something that you can tangibly say, right, as Emilie was saying, I'm going to try this for a few months. So it might be on your own, but it might be in partnership with those around you. And this thing, right, this is about what feeds us, what nourishes us, but also what stretches us, what takes us out of our comfort zone. So for those of us where it has been this big experiment, yeah, the context is different. We've had to do things differently. A number of my friends who've gone camping, okay, it hasn't been brilliant weather the last week. They've bought camper vans or they've hired them, experimenting with a slightly different context. So it's been disruptive. It's broken us out of the normal way of doing things. But, you know, reflect. Actually, did you actually enjoy those old ways of living and, you know, even your hobbies? Were you just going through the motions? And then taking a bigger view of life. I think this whole experiment around, you know, people have been reflecting about what impact do I have on the world? I know that's a sort of something millennial generation, more and more, they want meaning. And what, if I'm going to join your organization, what purpose? Well, we can take stock with that. What good do you do in the world? What impact do you have? Is it about, you know, whether it's about going vegetarian for a while, it's about trying to become zero carbon, or in terms of recycling more, reducing your impact on the world. Now, maybe I'm being a bit sort of broad there, but you can use this as an opportunity to say, you know what, let's create a little project. And don't have to go all in. I can just try it for a few months. And then I can reflect on whether I want to keep going, I want to diversify, or I just want to stop doing that and do something different altogether. Is there anything for you, Emilie, that you're going to be experimenting on the next 3-4 months?
I mean, I've definitely really enjoyed the kind of shopping locally, and I'm trying to kind of shop without plastic packaging, which is so hard, so hard. But the point of the experiment isn't that you have to do it perfectly. You just got to give it a good shot. So I'm trying 4 weeks without plastic packaging, which is getting very tricky. But Abel and Cole have delivered a nice box of vegetables today, so that's worked out well. I think with relationships or with family time, or even with your flatmates, just kind of tapping in and saying, okay, like every Sunday, why don't we have lunch together and make something special out of it? Because we can't go out partying necessarily. We can go out to restaurants, but it's slightly different. And bringing those kind of nice rituals into our lives, which I think are really important. So maybe come up with some rituals, but you don't have to commit to it for life. You just say, well, for a month, let's try this. Or the last Friday every month, let's have a supper club with our friends and see how it goes. I think they're a really nice, positive experiment, as well as some of the experiments we said about kind of environmentalism or choosing new exercise. And I had one of my clients, Lawrence, you'll agree with this, but we learn so much from our clients. I mean, we love coaching, and I'm sure our clients hopefully get a lot out of it, but also clients say things and you just think, wow, like that's amazing what they just said. I had a client who had just independently set themselves this experiment, that they had realized at work they had been adapting their style quite a lot to the culture of the rest of the people. And that as a result, they were feeling slightly disempowered, and they weren't sure that they were necessarily getting the same results that they could. And so they said, unprompted by me, for a month, they were going to try being more authentic at work. And it's been really interesting. And they have found that people were a little bit surprised, but then they started responding really positively, and they've actually got much better results. So I thought that was a fantastic big experiment to just try being more yourself, not just at work, but in your relationships. Try and be a bit more authentic. You know, when we said turning down an invitation, just be authentic. Just say, you know what, I've got to manage my schedule because I get too tired if I go out every night. So I'm not going to say yes to this. So I thought that was a fantastic experiment. And one of my clients is reading a book called The Artist's Way, which sets you lots of experiments about being creative. And they're having a lot of fun with it. But why don't you just draw a picture every day? Even if you think you're not a creative person, just try and sketch something. It's not for anyone else, but just bring that creativity out in yourself. That's an experiment that I really like as well.
I like that. And the only thing I'd add to that, it's just basically goes back to your point, Emilie, about it's been the biggest experiment and disruptor. But we can do that. We have far more power than we give ourselves credit for. But when we just live out our habits and we're on just that treadmill of life, it's like it looks like the power is out there. Well, it's been disrupted, hasn't it? So hold that power within, and you have that power to disrupt. You know, why do I do it like that? Because I always have. If you're having those kind of narratives, I invite you to sort of say, well, do I have to keep doing it like that? Or as I often say to some of my clients, that, you know, what got you to this level isn't going to get you to the next level. So disrupt yourself and you might be surprised. And this is the whole point, isn't it, Emilie, that we created like what we call the Conscious Living series, living with more consciousness, more awareness, not just playing out our habits, which is so important for so many aspects of our life. And it's a lot more interesting. That's my personal take on it. A lot more stimulating, and life is a lot richer. And it sounds, you know, there has been an existential threat to this. I know I've lost people within this process, people who have long-term health conditions that have been massively impacted. And people have thought about, you know, the meaning of life. They've gone a bit deep with all this. Well, if the meaning of life is to be alive, how alive do you want to feel? That's what I'm sort of seeing it as now, that emerging out of this, yes, there's a long way. Who knows what the world's going to look like, but how alive can I be? And actually, if you reflect on some of the things that Emilie's been suggesting, what I've been sharing, you've got a huge opportunity to basically create the way you want to live, despite the ongoing challenging circumstances.
Thanks so much, Lawrence. And it's so true that if you're not happy about something in your life, or you feel resistance to something, or you're not enjoying it, you can choose to do it differently. We have much more choice than we realize. And that really is what conscious living was all about. So what we're going to do is we're going to share in the link below this video, we're going to share the recording of our original Chartered Management Institute webinar, so you can watch the whole thing and understand what we're talking about in more depth. On the same link, you're also going to be able to download the workbook. So we went into much more detail. We had a workbook people could work through. You know, this isn't just a kind of half-hour reflection. This is something where you could really go quite deep if you really want to get the most out of it. So we're going to share the link where you can get our workbook, and also where you can sign up to our Conscious Careers workshop, where we're going to cover in more detail the real issue around your career and how do you make career decisions. Because we spend so much time at work that making good career decisions and making your career work for you is really fundamental to a lot of people's happiness and well-being. So thank you so much to everyone who's watched us through to the end. And we really hope you enjoy our CMI workshop recording. And we look forward to seeing you at one of our workshops soon.
Great. Thanks for watching.